So Resident Evil 6 came out recently, and despite what some others are saying, I actually find it to be quite an excellent game. However, I decided that I want to review Resident Evil 5 instead. It's turned out to be a huge divider of Resident Evil fans, but how do I think it stacks up? In Resident Evil 5, you play as Chris Redfield, who, as part of the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, or the BSAA, is tasked with investigating a possible bioterrorism outbreak in a remote region of Africa. He is joined by Sheva Alomar of the West African branch of the BSAA. The story is engaging, but the Resident Evil games have a lot of backstory, and not too much of it is explained in this game. That being said, though, it's not necessary to know everything about Resident Evil to play this game. This was the first Resident Evil game I played, actually, and while I didn't understand all the references to past Resident Evil games, I understood the plot well enough to understand what was going on. A lot of people knock the Resident Evil series for its atrociously written dialogue, and often put it in the "it's so bad it's funny" category. But aside from a few moments, I would say that Resident Evil 5 probably has the least cringeworthy moments of the Resident Evil games I've played. Overall, the story is just as engaging as it needs to be, and fans of the series should take interest in all the nods to past games. As for how the game plays, it's unique in its own right. It plays almost exactly like Resident Evil 4, so if you've played that, then you pretty much know what you're getting into. If you haven't played Resident Evil 4, then the game plays pretty much like a third-person shooter, but with the twist being that you can't fire from the hip and you cannot move while you're aiming, so it is literally impossible to move and shoot in this game at the same time. While that sounds incredibly annoying, it actually works just fine. There's a frustrating moment or two when you're reloading and then get hit because your character can't move and reload either, but eventually you get used to it. Being that Chris has a partner in Sheva, this game can also be played cooperatively with a friend, and honestly, the co-op in this game is some of the most fun I've had with a friend in a long time. It's fantastic, it really is. A lot of people complain about Sheva's AI when you aren't playing co-op, saying that she wastes ammo on healing items, but I never found her to be much of an issue in these areas. Ammo conservation has always been a staple of the Resident Evil series, but while you can't just spray bullets into the various enemies, ammo isn't too hard to come by. So you need to be careful, but you probably won't be deciding whether or not it's best to kill an enemy or just to run away from it in this game. You'll most likely have enough ammo just to kill it. Plus, when you finish the game, you can unlock infinite ammo, completely negating the ammo conservation issue. However, I actually find this feature to be quite fun, because just running back through the game and blowing the crap out of everything with your triple-barreled shotgun or your massively overpowered handgun is rather enjoyable. When you're not blasting away at enemies with your overpowered guns with infinite ammo, however, it can be a good tactic and ammo saver to shoot an enemy to stun them, and then follow up with a melee attack, of which there are several different kinds. Using this tactic on the various enemies proves to be quite effective, actually. Speaking of the enemies, though, there are some really excellently designed enemies in boss fights. None of them are too taxing in terms of having to figure out how to kill them, but they are all interesting looking and fun to take out. I also can't forget to talk about the Mercenaries mode, which is unlocked after you complete the game. In Mercenaries mode, you have a certain amount of time to take out as many enemies as you can, gaining bonuses for killing multiple enemies in a row. You can find more time scattered throughout the map, or you can gain extra time by killing an enemy with a melee attack, putting even more emphasis on the shoot and then punch tactic than there is in the main campaign. While it sounds simple, Mercenaries can turn out to be quite the addicting side mode. One thing people tend to complain about in this game is the atmosphere. Resident Evil 5 has been critiqued for having completely thrown away the concept of survival horror. What I will say is that the game is not scary. It just isn't. That being said, however, I did not find Resident Evil 4 to be scary either, so I find Resident Evil 5's brighter, more varied environments more enjoyable than Resident Evil 4's consistently gray environments. On the note of environments, Resident Evil 5 looks spectacular, and my recording equipment somewhat betrays that, but it really does look excellent. As for the sound, it works. None of the music really stands out, but it always works in the situation that it's in. The voice acting is also pretty excellent, so overall there are no issues I have with the sound. In the end, if you aren't worried about Resident Evil 5 betraying the idea of survival horror, then you will find in it a highly engaging single-player experience and an out-of-this-world co-op experience. This is one of my favorite games, and I really recommend you try it.